The battle had barely begun when the Dominion warriors realized something was terribly wrong. The attack on the human outpost was supposed to be a simple operation, quick, efficient, and overwhelming. The Dominion had sent their best soldiers, battle-hardened veterans who had fought in countless wars across the galaxy. Their orders were clear: wipe out the human settlement, crush any resistance, and establish complete control. The Dominion had superior numbers, advanced weapons, and decades of strategic warfare experience. Victory should have been guaranteed, but it wasn't. Something was off. Something was very, very wrong. The first sign of trouble came when the frontline troops opened fire. Their weapons were precise, their targeting systems locked onto the human defenders. And yet, they missed. Not because of poor aim, not because of malfunctioning weapons. They missed because the humans weren't there anymore. The moment the Dominion soldiers squeezed the trigger, the humans were already moving, ducking, rolling, and diving behind cover before the shots were even fired. The alien soldiers hesitated, confused. How was that possible? No species moved that fast. No species could predict an attack before it happened. But the humans did. Again and again, Dominion warriors unleashed a barrage of firepower. And every time, the humans reacted just in time, dodging, twisting, weaving through the chaos like they knew what was coming. The Dominion commander, watching from a high ground position, narrowed his reptilian eyes in frustration. Increase fire rate. He barked through his communicator. The soldiers obeyed, unleashing a storm of plasma and energy rounds at the human defenders. The battlefield was now an inferno of destruction, explosions lighting up the sky, debris flying in every direction. The humans should have been overwhelmed. They should have been dead. But they weren't. They were thriving. The commander watched in growing horror as the human fighters moved like ghosts, reacting with an unnatural awareness that defied all logic. They didn't just dodge. They moved before the shots even reached them. A Dominion scout, positioned on the outskirts, zoomed in with his visor, recording everything. He studied the humans closely, trying to understand how they were doing this. That's when he saw it. It wasn't just their speed. It was something else. The way their eyes flickered a fraction of a second before an attack, the way their bodies adjusted just before an explosion, the way they flinched before a sniper even pulled the trigger. It was almost as if, no, that was impossible. The humans were reacting before they were even attacked. The scout's claws tightened around his rifle as an icy realization crept through him. It wasn't just speed. It wasn't just training. It was something deeper, something unnatural. The battle raged on, but the Dominion forces were no longer attacking with confidence. Doubt was creeping into their ranks. Fear, a word spread among the soldiers, whispered in disbelief. They see the future. It sounded ridiculous, absurd, impossible. And yet, there was no other explanation. Humans were not just dodging gunfire. They were reacting before danger arrived, before a plasma bolt was fired, before a grenade was thrown, before a blade was swung. They already knew. The Dominion commander refused to accept it. They're just fast, he snarled. Push forward. Overwhelm them. But his soldiers hesitated. How do you fight an enemy that knows what you're going to do before you do it? The humans weren't using advanced technology. They weren't using psychic abilities or time manipulation. They were just built differently. Their instincts, their reflexes, their awareness, it was beyond anything the Dominion had ever encountered. And then, the unthinkable happened. A Dominion elite warrior, a massive armored brute twice the size of a human, charged forward, roaring in rage. His blade gleamed under the battlefield's burning sky as he swung it with inhuman strength, aiming for a human soldier who had his back turned. It should have been an easy kill, a decisive, brutal strike. But the human moved. Before the blade even reached him, he didn't turn to see it. He didn't look. He just ducked, as if he had felt it coming. as if his body had already decided before his brain even processed the threat. The Dominion warrior's attack sliced through empty air, and before he could recover, the human twisted, counterattacking with a single precise shot to the head. The massive alien fell, lifeless, his body hitting the ground like a collapsing tower. Silence spread across the battlefield. The Dominion forces froze, staring in shock. The humans had unnatural reflexes, impossible reflexes, and in that moment, the Dominion realized the truth. They were not fighting an inferior species. They were fighting something else, something terrifying. And for the first time in history, the Dominion felt fear. Panic rippled through the Dominion ranks like a virus. The battle was not going as expected, and the warriors knew it. They had fought countless species before, crushed hundreds of civilizations, and expanded their empire through sheer dominance. Every species had a weakness. Every species could be overwhelmed. But the humans, they were different. They didn't just fight back. They moved in ways that defied all logic. It wasn't just skill. It wasn't just experience. It was something else. Something unnatural. The Dominion commander clenched his jaw, his reptilian eyes scanning the battlefield with growing frustration. His forces had the advantage in numbers, technology, and firepower. And yet, the humans weren't dying. They weren't even retreating. They were holding their ground with precision and brutality that should have been impossible. He watched as one of his best soldiers, a veteran of 100 wars, engaged a human in close combat. The Dominion warrior was faster, stronger, and equipped with the latest combat armor. He swung his blade, aiming for the human's throat. A perfect, lethal strike. But before the blow could land, the human was already gone. No species should have been able to react that fast. No species should have been able to see an attack before it happened. But that's exactly what was happening. The human twisted at the last second, his body moving with impossible grace, as if he had known exactly where the blade would go before it even moved. Then, with a single fluid motion, the human counterattacked. One precise shot straight through the Dominion soldier's helmet. A clean, effortless kill. The commander's blood ran cold. From the edges of the battlefield, Dominion scouts were frantically analyzing the combat footage, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. Slow-motion replays revealed a horrifying truth. The humans weren't reacting to attacks. They were moving before the attacks happened. Their bodies adjusted before a shot was fired. Their muscles tensed before an explosion. Their heads tilted before a sniper took aim. It was beyond speed, beyond instinct. It was something the Dominion had never seen before. The whispers among the troops grew louder. They see the future. It sounded absurd, but what other explanation was there? The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds, wiped out countless species, but never, not once, had they fought an enemy like this. Fear began to spread through the ranks. Warriors hesitated before engaging. Snipers found themselves second-guessing their shots. A deep primal terror crept into their minds. The realization that they were fighting something beyond their understanding. The humans, on the other hand, fought with terrifying efficiency. They didn't waste movement. They didn't hesitate. They didn't falter. It was almost like they weren't even thinking, just acting. One human ducked before a plasma shot was fired, spun around, and delivered a perfect counterattack. Another human moved sideways just before a Dominion soldier lunged with a blade, sidestepping the attack with inhuman precision before delivering a deadly strike of his own. The Dominion commander's breathing was shallow. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. His forces should have crushed these humans within minutes, but instead, they were being cut down, one by one. It wasn't that the humans were invincible. It wasn't that they had better weapons or stronger armor. It was that they could predict the battle itself. Desperation set in. The commander activated his communication relay. Deploy heavy artillery. Crush them before they get any closer. His officers hesitated. Commander, our fire teams are reporting difficulties. The humans. I don't want excuses. Deploy the artillery now." The order was given. Massive plasma cannons, the Dominion's most devastating long-range weaponry, locked onto the human position. The battlefield lit up with energy as the first salvo was launched. Enough firepower to reduce entire city blocks to ash. The Dominion forces held their breath, waiting for the explosion to wipe the humans from existence. It never happened. The moment the artillery fired, the humans moved, as if they had known, as if they had sensed it before the first shot was even launched. They scattered, evading the incoming bombardment with terrifying precision. Not a single human was caught in the blast. Not a single one was injured. The Dominion commander's hands clenched into fists. This was impossible. His soldiers stood frozen, watching the dust clear. The humans should have been vaporized. They should have been dead. But instead, they were advancing. Then, a new realization hit him, one far more terrifying than anything else. The humans weren't just reacting to the battle. They were controlling it. They were leading the Dominion forces exactly where they wanted them to go. And the worst part, the Dominion had already fallen into their trap. You said the battlefield was no longer just chaos. It was something worse. It was controlled chaos, and the humans were the ones in control. The Dominion warriors, once confident in their overwhelming power, were now filled with doubt. The enemy they faced was unlike any they had ever encountered. They had fought against fast species before. They had battled against telepaths, strategists, and creatures with instincts sharper than a blade. But this was something else entirely. The humans were anticipating everything. Every shot fired at them missed, not because they dodged, but because they had already moved before the shot was even taken. Every ambush set against them failed, not because they reacted fast, but because they never walked into the trap in the first place. They weren't just faster. They weren't just stronger. It was something deeper, something far more terrifying. The Dominion forces had superior numbers. They had better weapons. They had decades of combat experience against all manner of alien species, and yet they were losing. The humans weren't fighting in a traditional sense. They weren't charging forward recklessly, nor were they simply defending. No, they were weaving through the battle like ghosts, appearing exactly where they needed to be, striking exactly when they needed to strike, disappearing before anyone could react. It was as if they were a step ahead of time itself. The Dominion commander's tail twitched in frustration. His warriors were trained to fight the best. They were the best. And yet, his forces were collapsing before his very eyes. He watched through his visor as one of his soldiers, a skilled marksman, one of the finest snipers in the entire Dominion, took careful aim at a human. The distance was perfect. The angle was flawless. The shot was guaranteed. The soldier exhaled slowly, steadying his aim, and pulled the trigger. The human was already gone. Not after the shot, before it. The commander's blood ran cold. He rewound the footage, watching in slow motion. Before the trigger was pulled, before the energy round had even formed in the chamber, the human had already moved his head slightly to the left. The sniper's shot passed through the space where his skull had been just a fraction of a second ago. It was impossible. There was no way the human could have known. And yet he had. The Dominion forces were beginning to crack. Some whispered the unthinkable, that the humans could see the future. Others insisted it was some kind of unnatural technology, an implant or hidden device that gave them an unfair advantage. But deep down, the Dominion commander knew the truth. This was not technology. This was something intrinsic to the humans themselves. Then came the breaking point. A battalion of Dominion warriors launched a full-scale charge. It was a desperate move, but necessary. If they could overwhelm the humans in sheer numbers, if they could force them into close combat, then maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide of battle. It was a massacre. The moment the charge began, the humans were already in motion. They split apart, their formations shifting like liquid, adapting instantly. The Dominion warriors charged right into their trap. Explosions ripped through their ranks, but the humans hadn't fired a single shot. No, they had simply maneuvered the Dominion forces into the exact location where their own artillery was about to land. Screams filled the air. The charge collapsed within seconds. The Dominion forces that survived tried to retreat, but the humans were already waiting for them. A single squad of humans moved forward, calm, efficient, ruthless. They didn't waste energy on unnecessary movement. They didn't hesitate. Every shot they fired hit a fatal point. Every strike they delivered ended a life. It wasn't just precision. It was perfection. The Dominion commander gritted his teeth. His forces were being toyed with. He had underestimated these creatures. Every species had weaknesses. But humans exploited weakness itself. The realization was horrifying. Humans weren't just good at war. They were built for it. The Dominion forces were breaking. Their once mighty warriors reduced to desperate survivors scrambling for cover. The battlefield that had once been theirs was now a hunting ground, and the humans were the predators. There was no doubt left. The humans weren't simply faster or stronger. They weren't just better trained. They fought with an instinct that defied logic, as if they weren't just reacting to the battle but predicting it. The Dominion commander watched the chaos unfold from the safety of his command post, his claws digging into the metal railing. He replayed the battle footage over and over, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. How had they lost control so quickly? Every time his forces tried to set up a defensive line, the humans were already moving to flank them. Every time they tried to launch a counterattack, the humans had already vanished. It was as if they could see the battle 5 steps ahead, as if they already knew what was going to happen before it did. He turned to his tactical officer, his voice tight with frustration. Have the humans deployed a precognition technology, some kind of advanced battlefield eye? The officer's eyes were wide with fear. He shook his head. No, sir. No implants. No cybernetics. We've scanned their frequencies. They're using standard comms, no AI assistance. He swallowed. They're just doing this on their own. The commander's scales itched with unease. He turned back to the battlefield feed, zooming in on a small squad of human soldiers advancing toward a trench filled with Dominion warriors. The trench was heavily fortified. Any logical force would stop, assess the situation, and prepare a coordinated assault. The humans didn't stop. They didn't hesitate. Without a single word, they split apart, moving like a single entity. One of them dove forward, drawing fire. The Dominion soldiers aimed, fired, and missed. Not because they had bad aim, but because the human had already moved before they even pulled the trigger. A second human emerged from the side, a perfectly timed shot striking the Dominion officer in the trench before he could issue an order. Another dropped down from above, landing behind the enemy line before anyone could react. It was over in seconds. The trench was cleared. The humans didn't even look at each other. No words, no signals. It was as if they already knew what the others were thinking. The Dominion commander's blood ran cold. This was not normal. This was not possible. A trembling voice crackled through his command channel. One of his frontline officers, barely holding his composure. Commander, we can't fight this. We don't understand how they move. We don't understand how they know. The commander clenched his jaw. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to believe his forces could still turn this battle around. But deep down, he knew the truth. The humans weren't winning this battle. They were controlling it. The Dominion forces were unraveling, their disciplined formations collapsing into chaos. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were shaping it, turning every engagement into a series of impossible decisions for their enemies. The commander had seen many battles in his lifetime, but never anything like this. The humans didn't fight with hesitation. They didn't wait. They didn't second guess. It was as if their bodies moved before their minds processed the danger. He watched as a group of Dominion soldiers tried to set up a fallback position behind a line of energy barriers. It should have been an impenetrable defense. But before the barriers had even fully deployed, the humans were already moving, predicting the cover spots, adjusting their angles, and cutting down the defenders before they could even react. His claws dug into his armrests. How was this happening? He switched the feed to a different unit, a Dominion fire team taking shelter in a ruined building, covering the street below with heavy weapons, a perfect ambush location. Any normal enemy would walk right into the kill zone. But not the humans. They paused for exactly 1 second. Then, as if they could sense the danger, they changed their route. Instead of walking into the kill zone, they climbed, leaped, maneuvered through the rubble like creatures who had evolved for war itself. In seconds, they were on the roof, coming down from above. Before the Dominion even realized they had been outmaneuvered, the ambush had become a slaughter. The commander's hearts pounded. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't training. It was something else. He had spent years studying war, refining tactics, understanding probabilities. But none of that mattered now. The humans weren't fighting by the rules of war. They were reacting before the battle even happened. Another Dominion officer's voice crackled over the comms, his breathing heavy with panic. "Commander, we're falling back to Rally Point Epsilon. The humans, they don't dodge fire. They're already gone before we even shoot." The commander remained silent, watching the footage. He had already seen it himself. A Dominion soldier would aim, fire, and nothing. The human wasn't there anymore. Not because they saw the shot coming, not because they reacted to it, but because they had already moved before the shot was even taken. As if their bodies knew something their minds didn't. The officer's voice grew more frantic. "Sir, they're not normal. They move too fast. It's not just reflexes. It's like they can feel the battle before it happens. We can't." The transmission cut off. The commander knew what that meant. Another squad gone. He felt a deep, terrible realization settle into his bones. This wasn't just about superior tactics. This wasn't just about experience. The humans were built for battle in a way no Dominion species could understand. And worse, they weren't even trying yet. The battlefield was no longer a battlefield. It was a massacre. The Dominion forces, once confident in their numbers and strategy, were now nothing more than prey running from a predator they couldn't comprehend. The humans weren't just winning. They were hunting. The commander's mind raced as he watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. Every calculation, every logical maneuver they attempted was met with something far worse than resistance: anticipation. Humans didn't react. They preempted. Another squad was cornered in an alleyway, their backs against a thick concrete wall, weapons drawn. A kill zone. Anyone charging in would be cut down instantly. But then the shadows moved. The Dominion soldiers turned, too late. Humans dropped from above, landing with an unnatural smoothness, as if they had known exactly where to be before the fight even started. A heartbeat later, flashes of gunfire tore through the alley. The Dominion soldiers never stood a chance. The commander's hands trembled. What kind of monsters were these? He switched feeds, desperate to find a pattern, an explanation, anything that could help them turn the tide. But it was always the same. Human reflexes were unnatural. A Dominion sniper team had taken position atop a high ridge, scanning for targets with precision scopes. They had been trained for decades, their aim flawless, their instincts sharp. They fired. The human was already gone. Not dodging, not flinching, simply not there anymore. It was as if they had felt the bullet before it was even fired. The sniper team tried again, adjusting for movement, predicting human speed. But it didn't matter. Their target moved not in reaction to the shot, but before it even happened. A second later, the snipers screamed. Their scopes showed nothing, then everything. The humans were already upon them. The commander felt sick. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. A Dominion warbeast, a towering, cybernetically enhanced predator bred for battle, charged at a lone human soldier. Its claws could tear through steel, its reflexes superior to any organic warrior in the Dominion army. The human didn't run. The warbeast lunged and missed. It wasn't that the human had dodged. No, they had already stepped aside before the beast even moved. The warbeast tried again, faster this time. More desperate. A direct swipe at the human's head. Nothing. The human was already behind it. With a single gunshot, the warbeast collapsed. The battlefield had become something else entirely. This wasn't war. This was a demonstration. A whisper of dread spread through the Dominion ranks. Humans weren't just faster. They weren't just smarter. They were something else entirely. And the worst part, they weren't even breaking a sweat. The silence that followed was worse than the battle itself. Not a single Dominion soldier dared to move. The once mighty army that had prided itself on centuries of conquest now stood frozen, staring at the horror unfolding before them. Humans weren't just winning. They were toying with them. The commander's breathing was shallow. He could feel his heart's pounding against his ribs, the terror sinking deep into his bones. His tactical display was flooded with distress signals from scattered squads, pleas for reinforcement, cries for evacuation. None of it would matter. There was no escape. The humans were everywhere. One squad had barricaded themselves inside a fortified bunker, thinking they had found safety. It was a mistake. The humans didn't attack head-on like any other species. They didn't waste energy trying to break through reinforced doors or thick walls. They were already inside. A Dominion soldier backed into a corner, gripping his rifle so tight his fingers turned pale. The rest of his team was gone. No sounds of gunfire, no explosions, just silence. One by one, they had disappeared. And then he saw them. The human soldiers stood in the dim light, motionless, waiting. His training told him to raise his weapon, but some deep primal fear rooted him to the ground. He had always believed humans were just another species, strong, yes, but still bound by the same limitations of biology. But this was something else entirely. The humans weren't normal. He blinked. They were gone. A whisper of air, a flicker in the shadows, and then the pain. The last thing he saw was cold, calculating eyes staring down at him as his body collapsed. The Dominion commander's claws scraped against the metal of his command console. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Humans weren't supposed to be invincible. They weren't supposed to predict attacks before they happened. He watched, helpless, as the last of his forces tried to flee. It was useless. A Dominion gunship roared into the sky, engines burning hot as it attempted to escape the nightmare below. It had barely left the ground before the targeting alarm screamed. A single human jet appeared from nowhere, moving too fast for any radar to track. It was impossible. How had they anticipated the escape before it even happened? The human aircraft released a single missile. The gunship never had a chance. Flames filled the sky. The commander's breathing turned to gasps. His mind refused to accept the truth. How? How could this be happening? He turned, desperate for answers, searching for something. Asterisk, asterisk, anything. Asterisk, asterisk, that would explain how the most elite army in the galaxy had been torn apart without resistance. Then he heard it. A slow, steady sound. Boots. Human boots. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. They were here. He turned too late. A single human soldier stood in the doorway of his command center. No armor, no massive weapons, just a simple rifle slung over his shoulder and a quiet, knowing stare. The Dominion commander reached for his weapon, his instincts screaming at him to fight, to do something. The human just sighed. "You already lost," he said, as if he had known all along. The commander froze. They had known. The battle, the strategy, the desperate counterattacks. None of it mattered. The humans had already seen the outcome before the war had even begun. And that's when the fear truly set in. Because this wasn't just a victory. This was a message.